Welcome to the eye dissection. So in this dissection, we'll be covering the basic anatomy and physiology of the eye. So at the front of the eye is the cornea, which is a dome-shaped structure that basically helps direct light into the eye. And right just posterior to that, so behind that, is the iris. Now the iris is basically a ring-shaped muscle, and it's the colored part of the eye. And it controls how much light enters the eye. In addition, the hole in the iris is called the pupil. The pupil is the opening through which light enters. So if you can see here, the dome-shaped structure is the cornea, and then right behind that are the lens and the pupil and so on. So an interesting fact about the iris is that it actually has a unique pattern in every human being. So even identical twins will have different iris patterns. Let's talk about the lens. The lens is right behind the iris, and it's basically a transparent structure that can focus light onto the retina, which is at the back of the eye. Now when light enters, it actually flips. So light coming from the bottom of your visual field strikes photoreceptors at the top of your eye, and light coming from the top of your eye strikes photoreceptors at the bottom of the eye. There's a process of the lens called accommodation. So when you look at things that are really, really far away, the lens flattens out, and this allows light rays to enter into the eye from far distances. Now, when you're trying to focus on something that's really, really close by, the lens actually becomes bent or rounded, and this allows the light to actually enter the eye from a close distance. At the back of the eye, there are different structures, the photoreceptors, which basically sense light, which are the rods and the cones. So the cones detect color, and they're concentrated in the center of the eye, and also in a region of the eye called the fovea. And towards the outer edges of the retina, there's higher amounts of rod cells. And the rod cells basically help you see in dark conditions, so in dim lights. And cats actually have very, very good night vision because they have a higher proportion of rods in their eyes. Now, if you ever wondered where the blind spot comes from, it's basically because the structure of the eye is such that nerves actually pass in front of the rods and the cones. So the nerves have to leave the eye somewhere, right? So they leave in an area called the optic disc. So the optic disc basically is the region where the optic nerve exits the eye and then travels to the brain. So that's why there's a part of your visual field where you don't see anything, and that's because there are no rods and cones in that area. I'll talk about a little bit about the brain. So the nerve cells actually cross over in an area called the optic chiasms. The left visual field goes to the right side of the brain, and on the right eye, that's also the same. The left visual field goes to the right side of the brain. And in the right visual field of both eyes, they both go to the left side of the brain, and they pass through these areas in the brain called the lateral geniculate nuclei. And from there, they then travel to the primary visual cortex. in the eye, in the retina, there are cells called, there are the rods and cones, of course. So these are the rods and the cones. And these are the rod cells. And then in front of those are the horizontal cells. So the horizontal cells, they basically receive information from photoreceptors, and then they transmit that information to other photoreceptors. So what this means is that when light stimulates one photoreceptor, they'll actually inhibit, so they prevent the neighboring ones from firing. So because this inhibits the neighboring cells, it actually makes it sharper and more contrasted, and it makes images clearer. And this is called lateral inhibition. And then right in front of those are the bipolar cells, and nerve signals travel from the rods and the cones through the bipolar cells, and also there's these cells called the horizontal amacrine cells, and these transmit information from one bipolar cell to multiple ganglion cells. And then it's the axons of the ganglion cells which then converge or come together and form the optic nerve. So there was this guy called Vic Tandy, and he was working in his laboratory, which was actually known to be haunted. It had a reputation for being haunted. And the reason is that people would come into this laboratory and they would see these really disturbing and strange things, like strange shadowy figures moving through the hallways, ghostly apparitions appearing and disappearing in their peripheral vision. So this guy, Vic Tandy, while he was working in his laboratory, he suddenly felt a really strange sense of fear and a feeling that someone was watching him. So he's all alone in his laboratory working and has a reputation of being haunted, and he suddenly sees a ghostly apparition shape appear out of the corner of his eye, and he looks up and there's nothing there. And he later finds out that this is caused by infrasound. So human beings hear between 20 to 20,000 hertz. So this is the frequency of the sounds that we can hear. The infrasound was actually 18.98 hertz, which is a lower frequency than the human hearing range. And the reason that this frequency caused these visual disturbances is because this frequency, 18.98 hertz, is also the resonant frequency of the eyeball, which means that the eyeball vibrates when 18.98 hertz of sound are applied onto it. So basically, this somehow caused the rod cells in the peripheral areas of his retina to be stimulated abnormally. And this caused his visual disturbances and seeing ghosts. And also, if you want to ever experience this sound, it's actually on YouTube called the ghost frequency. But you need special speakers to play it because it's infrasound. However, it can also cause feelings of panic and anxiety. But if you ever want to, see ghosts, you can always check out the ghost frequency.